Good afternoon. It's my pleasure to talk to you today about a subject which is very near and dear to the way I think about things in medicine. As you well know, we're in our 12th or 13th year of providing various tools to do endovascular repair of abdominal aortic aneurysm. And it was in late 1999 that the FDA in the United States approved the first two Anurex and Ancure devices for treatment of endovascular aneurysm. Since that time, there have been multiple other devices put into development. The industry has spent millions and millions of dollars developing new endovascular aneurysm treatment devices. Unfortunately, for the most part, they're all Me Too devices, which means they have the same shortcomings and the same longcomings of the previous devices. And the purpose of this talk today is to provide for you an insight into somebody who actually, I hate this term, but it is thought outside the box to try to solve the problems that are related to endovascular aneurysm repair. As you know, EVAR has multiple unmet clinical needs. There's a high rate of secondary interventions. It's secondary to either endoleaks, primarily type 2s, migration and occlusion. Migration especially can be related to the presence of endoleak. And also the challenging anatomies associated with endovascular repair, tortuous iliac vessels, heavily diseased iliac arteries, multiple combinations of aneurysm neck, reverse cones, and a variety of other things, lots of thrombus or calcium in the anchoring sites in the neck. And then you have a problem of aneurysm stability and regression, and the surveillance requirements are really quite expensive if you have to surveil people with a CT scan at least once a year, or even ultrasound periodically. If you look at the EVAR rates of secondary interventions, you look at the bottom number on the right side, you'll see it's about 18% in 3.5 years. And if you look at these various studies, some of which are single center, some of them are randomized controlled trials, you'll notice that most of the interventions have occurred pretty regularly around about that 18% rate. And if you look at things like Manish Mehta's paper from the group in northern New York State, what you see is the big offenders are type 2 endoleak, type 1 and 3 endoleak, and graft migration. And these are all related to both disease progression and design of the devices. And I think it's also important to note that if you have an endoleak, it costs you about 5 times as much to surveil these people yearly, and it costs about 10 times as much if you have to intervene on one to correct a problem as if you do not have an endoleak. And I think lastly, Professor Greenall analyzed the outcomes of EVAR 1 and 2, and you may have your own opinion about how relevant those studies were, but certainly in looking at the late ruptures that occurred between 1.6 and 6.1 years after implant, 17 of them were associated with endoleak and progressive sac expansion. And it was highly statistically significant for a risk for rupture if you had those two things. The device manufacturer's challenge, therefore, has been to minimize or eliminate endoleaks, improve device conformability to match the patient's arterial anatomy, and to develop innovative means for endograft stabilization and techniques for preserving branch flow. And these are the devices, these are just some of the ones that they've spent many millions of dollars on as the new additions to the market. Aptus, Cordis, Incraft, Anaconda, Ovation was just recently added in the United States, Lombard, AortoFix. All of these devices really have pretty much the same limitations as the original devices that were developed. Some of them have a little bit lower profile, they can pass through a slightly smaller iliac vessel. Some of them lend themselves to percutaneous rather than open femoral artery exposure for implantation. But basically, they still don't address the problems of migration and endoleak. So, to get back to the concept of thinking outside the box, a group of people in Latvia, developed an idea that went beyond this. And they've looked at it in the United States, they've done some original implanting in Latvia and then in Canada and New Zealand. And basically what this is, it's a sac sealing stabilizing device. It's a very low profile system, 14 French delivery system. It uses your existing anatomy for fixation. It has two stainless steel, actually cobalt chromium alloy, balloon expandable stents, and the stability is provided by some circumferential polymer filled bags which stabilize the device within the aneurysm. There is really no neck angulation or neck length restriction or iliac aneurysm size restriction for implanting this device. This is the concept. You can see there are two separate accesses, one from the right, one from the left. They can be percutaneous or open. They're 14 French access systems. They deliver the stent with the endo bag around each one. The endo bag is, the stents are balloon expanded, the endo bag is deployed, and it's filled with a polymer, and it takes up all of the available space within the aneurysm sac. And that's what anchors the device in place. And on the upper left-hand corner, as I'm looking at it, probably your upper left-hand corner as well, you have the balloon expandable stent, which is cobalt chromium alloy, covered with EPTFE. You have the endo bag, which is a polyurethane bag. You've got the polymer cartridge delivery system, which has, it's a polyethylene glycol diacrylate polymer. And the control console is really what makes this endografting for what I consider to be very simple people, because it's just a matter of pushing the right button at the right time. And the process for deploying this is pretty much automatic. And this, if it plays, I hope it will. Hang on a minute. We'll see if it does. Should give you, but it's probably not. It's not. Too bad. We'll move forward. That was a cartoon which would show you how this device works. Unfortunately, it did not play. This is a 4-year salvaged endo bag with a polymer in it. What you see in the center is the polymer. It retains its shape. It has a consistency after it cures of about firm jello or a pencil eraser. And it doesn't break down, it doesn't change, it doesn't do anything. It remains totally stable and bioinert. So if you look at the EVAS technology development, endovascular sealing for aneurysm, it started in sheep, 2006, moved into a pilot project. The sheep all underwent explants at 4 or more years to study the behavior of the polymer and the endograft. And then we moved forward into clinical trials. And this year we will be starting first an IDE study in the United States involving 150 patients and approximately 16 sites. And then EVAS 2 will be in Europe. This will be a post-market study, about 200 patients. And if you look at the data for the group that were submitted to a European adjudicating body to determine whether they could get a C mark in Europe, which they did, you'll see that there were 1 type 1 endoleak, 1A, 1 type 1B endoleak, and these were relatively minor and were really related to early design problems with the device. This is a continuing implant, another 35 patients, and if you look at these again, as you can see, very interesting study. If you look at the outcomes here, they had 2 type 2 endoleaks, one occurring around 2 years, one occurring around 6 months. Both of these were related to the fact that the endo bag failed to reach the aneurysm wall completely. And all of these actually required no treatment. They thrombosed on their own. So this is the proximal type 1A. If you look at it, you can see in the left-hand side, you'll see where it's a little cul-de-sac at the top where the device was attached just below the renals, and at 6 months it thrombosed. The other side was where a middle sacral artery was not covered by the endo bag, and this did require an intervention. This was an early design device, and the device just did not deploy up that far in the iliac system. Here is an example of stability, and if you look across the bottom at 2 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 24 months, you'll notice the 2 limbs of this device do not move. They remain totally stable with relationship to the aneurysm wall, no change at all. And again, here's the IM. Look at the image on the left. The arrow is pointing to the IMA, and there's another arrow pointing to a large lumbar vessel. And if you see after the device has been deployed and the sac has been sealed, the IMA occludes, the lumbar occludes, and that's what they're supposed to do. The sac actually blocks them off, much as you would do if you were doing a secondary intervention. So the final design, as I mentioned, will be 150 patients in the United States. It's an IDE for the FDA, be multi-center, and that's going to start in Q3 of this year. And the EVAS-2, which is a post-market registry, will start in Europe sometime later this year, some 200 subjects, followed for 5 years. This is extremely interesting technology. It's a result of people who think outside the box to solve a problem which has vexed all of us who do endovascular aneurysm repair. Those of you who do know that the type 2 endoleak issue is the thing that brings people back. It's the thing you have to anguish over, and sooner or later you start to intervene on it. And though you may think you fix it for the time being, if you continue to follow these people, you find that they continue to recur. So something that can treat this up front and eliminate the problem is certainly a great step forward in making this available as a very useful and cost-efficient treatment for aneurysm disease. Thank you.